Courtney Waters is a mom, a business professional, and now a candidate for the Charleston County School Board to represent the North area. I speak exclusively to Courtney for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Courtney Waters, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Obviously, you are a business professional and have a lot of experience, that is, in education. And I know now that you want to take your experience in education to the Charleston County School Board to represent the students and parents of the North area. Tell me, why Courtney Waters? Why the Charleston County School Board?
Absolutely. So aside from my background and experience, which is background in education, which has spanned 10 years plus at this point, from being a classroom teacher, getting my master's in curriculum and instruction, working in a corporate philanthropy program where we gave funds to STEM programs, positive behavior incentive programs, and things of that nature. And now in my work, obviously working in education advocacy for Teach for America, I realize that I'm uniquely positioned to impact students, and I'm uniquely positioned to name the problems and be helpful toward creating solutions for them. The biggest thing for me, though, is that I think about the profile of students who graduate. If you think about a student at graduation, they're in the auditorium or the convention center, and the crowd is very noisy and it's full of excitement because everybody's about to walk across the stage and get that diploma. And this, for many students, is the biggest accomplishment of their lives. And so you step up, you take your diploma, and you look out and you see your family. They're screaming for you. They got the bullhorns going. And you feel a sense of pride. But then you picture that same student in the fall in college, taking remedial courses, although they had done just well in high school, according to the standards that were set for them, barely able to keep up with the material. And it's literally a bucket of cold water when you realize the things that I was preparing for didn't prepare me for the next step that I needed to get to. And as bad as that is, there are also students who walk across that stage with a heavy weight of frustration and anxiety on their backs because they just can't wait to be free of an education system that never prioritized them, never taught them that they were valuable, never showed them their own culture inside of it. And so I feel like now is the time, particularly with what's happening in our national climate around social justice and equity, now is the time to get people on the school board who are going to be very focused and thoughtful about the fact that our education system has only been working for a certain type of student, an able-bodied, white, basically, without disability kind of students whose parents are able or in a position to go and advocate for them at schools, instead of putting in systems that make sure that students don't get left behind no matter who's at the door yelling their name. And so I'm thinking now is the time, and adding to that, we've got 5 seats open. This is a unique opportunity to get 5 people on a 9-person board who can really make a difference for students, who can come together and bring consensus and get the work done.
You talk about Teach for America. How is the Teach for America positioning themselves to help students in the North area?
So, America is a national organization, and Teach for America South Carolina actually a statewide organization. So I can't speak to specifically the North area. We do have 1 or 2 teachers at, for instance, Deer Park Elementary. We have 1 at Deer Park. We've had 1 at Morningside. And we've got students at Meeting Street. But that is completely separate, actually, from this work on the school board, in that Teach for America actually places the lion's share of its teachers in Colleton County, the PD, the upstate. And so we're sort of spread out. And in that way, it's actually exciting for me because I haven't gotten to know Charleston County School District through my work for Teach for America as much as I have as a community member. And as a parent, frankly, now, who's going to be sending my daughter there and who wants to see something make a difference. See a difference be made.
And what exactly is your relationship with Teach for America?
So I'm employed by Teach for America. TFA is a nonprofit organization that finds teachers, folks who normally wouldn't have come to the classroom. They went to college and they studied engineering or they studied math or what have you. And we trained them and we placed them in classrooms to teach. These are typically in Title I schools. In Title I schools, these are students who receive free or reduced price lunch. They're typically thought to be the most under-resourced. And so we send teachers to those classrooms. My relationship is that I run the the External Affairs Department, meaning that for our alumni, I provide services to help them get plugged in to opportunities to grow their impact, whether they want to gain a national board certification, whether they want to come back to South Carolina and get a job in some South Carolina classroom. But we've got alumni all across the state that we help and support. And so my role is supporting them. And it's also just more broadly in making sure that the public will for Teach for America is there for us to be at the table when we're talking about equity in education.
You talk about equity. What is that like in the North area?
So, I think inequitable would be, one of the things that is striking is that most of the schools in this that are targeted for the acceleration district within Charleston County School District, which is sort of, there are 14 schools that need to be improved right now, that we know scores are low, there's all types of problems, lots of concerns that need to be addressed. Most of them are in the North Charleston area. And so, I think we could safely say that whatever the programs are, whatever the hiring practices are, whatever the curriculum is, whatever the extracurricular opportunities for students are, they're not reaching the students that need to be impacted by them. And so in equity in the North area, I think the word is actually inequity. I think that we need to be thinking about, so the idea of equity versus equality, right, is that all students are not the same. If I give you two pairs of shoes and I say, or a pair of shoes, and I say, run this race, you're going to run it and you're going to be fine. And the person next to you will run it and be fine, but one of you is automatically going to be a little bit better, maybe because you're naturally suited to run, maybe because you've been training to run, whatever the case may be. But if I give that same pair of shoes to students who a student who hasn't been training to run, is not used to the cadence, they're not going to run very fast. So maybe instead of just giving you both shoes and saying, well, you both had shoes, you could have run that race, maybe what I need to give this other student is a training program. Maybe what I need to give this other student is time away from whatever is calling them in a normal situation, calling their time away so that they can't fully focus on running that race. So equity looks like putting everybody at the same level, and that may mean that this student gets more, but they had a longer way to go to get there. And so that's really, I think, where we are in education as a whole, and I don't think it's any different in the North area.
What type of training program would you bring to the North area to fix that?
Well, I don't think that I could necessarily call a specific program now, not being nitty gritty and understanding exactly why the problems exist as they are today. What I can say is that if we go back to the beginning of history in education in South Carolina, is that the system was actually designed to do exactly what it's been doing, right? It's been designed to benefit certain students and not benefit others. And I think over time that's been attempted to be addressed with money. They've given more money probably than they used to. In the beginning, it was that schools with Black children were not funded at an equal dollar amount as students with schools with white students. But slowly that sort of evened out. But then you realize money is not the issue. Maybe the issue is that we need to create better supports to get parents involved. And it's not that parents don't want to be involved. A lot of times school districts have adversarial relationships with parents where, we're thinking, oh, the parents just don't want to be involved. But how are we setting up parent involvement opportunities? What time are those activities happening? What sorts of activities are there? Is there transportation? Are we meeting people where they are? So it could be a question. It could be, and these are obviously, I'm just saying, this is what it could be. But I would have to get in and figure out exactly, is it parental involvement? Is it lack of social and emotional support programs? Is it lack of reading programs? I would have to get in and really be in the conversations and understand what types of programs and what types of support are needed. And I think folks at the district are working. Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Oh, do you good?
I was going to say, I think folks at the district are working on things like that. But what I think is in my role as a board member, how I would help contribute to that is just by being an ear at the table who is uniquely concerned about these issues of equity, and is willing to, in a group setting, work to bring consensus around what it's going to take to make the change.
You talk about those reading programs. How many of those programs are needed right now in certain elementary schools in the North area?
Well, so again, I don't know exactly how many programs. I know there are programs like Reading Partners. I know there are reading interventionists that go into schools. I think the biggest issue is that if a child is not prepared to start reading at the third grade level, the chances are they're not going to catch up. So what's needed more than anything, I think, is early childhood approaches. So South Carolina is kind of late to the table as a state, getting early childhood programs instituted. I know Charleston County School District has some, but we really need to be making early childhood education more accessible to students, because if they're not reading by third grade, you can bring in all the reading intervention that you want. Students shift at the third grade level from learning to read to reading to learn. And so if you're reading and you cannot keep up with the material and comprehend what you're reading on the pages, then you can't keep up with the learning. And so early childhood education is really what I would want to see more so than specifically reading programs.
And let me get over to what's going on right now here in the country with the coronavirus outbreak. Obviously, many schools districts are trying to find a plan to reopen schools safely for students. And I know Governor McMaster recently said on Twitter, quote, "We must give parents the choice in how they want their children educated, whether that is sending them back to school for in-person learning or keeping them home for virtual learning. They should be able to make that choice with confidence." Question: should public schools have the option for a hybrid model to accommodate social distancing?
So I don't have a problem with I don't have a problem with COVID-19 creating a situation where we need a hybrid model for students. What I have more of an issue with is that there seems to be a lack of accountability here. The governor put it in the hands of the school districts to determine what that would look like, but there has to be an option for students to return to school. That's where the problem is. Where's the mandate of support around that? Where's the mandated number of students who can be in a school? Where's the protection for those teachers who have to go in those schools? Are they going to get additional sick days? What's going to happen to them if they need to be tested and they have to go out for 14 days? I don't even think they have 14 sick days as it is, right? I think what we've got to realize is, for most parents, this word choice is very misleading. People who work in manufacturing and have to go to work, their kids are going to be in school. People who can't stay home for work for various reasons, their kids are going to be in school. Students who need additional services, whether it be special ed services, they're going to be in school. And so there's a particular type of student that's going to be in school. And these, oh, by the way, just happen to be the same students who are traditionally not served well in the public school system. And so I think we've got to be aware, if you're going to send students who are most at risk of exposure because their parents are going out into the world and coming back in, you're going to send them into schools, then we have to think about supporting that whole family. How often is that family getting tested? Are we going to use some of this CARES Act money to make sure that testing is ramped up in a way that families who are sending students to school can be consistently tested? Because if not, we're exposing everybody who's in that building. You know, I think we gotta be very clear. When you give people a choice, again, it's about equity. What choice are you really leaving them with? I'm sending my kid to school because I have to, and I need a solution. But how is school going to look drastically different in order to protect my child? That's the question. And I don't think that the school district, as brilliant as folks at the school district are, it may be, they're not the ones who are close enough to the CDC to know all of the guidelines, who are close enough to all of the governmental resources and structures of support that could have helped. And so I think the state leadership should have leaned in a lot more intensively with a plan that at least a plan for the supports that would be available, not just saying, oh, here's the money, because that's the trick that we play.
And is this, in your mind, is it a mandate or is it a plan?
Well, certainly a mandate, and there is no plan, and there is no accountability. And I think it's unfortunate because school is going to look different for every child across the state, and the implications of going back to school are going to look different from every child across the state. And I think we won't even see the effects immediately. We'll see some of them, certainly rises in cases and things like that, but we won't know for a long time what impact this is going to have on, people's desire to enter the teaching profession overall, for instance.
Would a virtual until safe for modified instruction approach be ideal for you?
I don't think the word ideal is appropriate in any of this situation, right? Because we know that virtual instruction doesn't work because of lack of access to broadband. We know that virtual instruction is not ideal in many homes. But I do think that we should be trying very hard to get to a place where it's ideal. Instead of just saying we're going to send the kids back into the building, we should be trying to make the best use of virtual instruction that we possibly can and figure out how we can support students who hadn't been supported last semester. I think we could have taken those lessons learned and created some plans for how to bring virtual instruction to the students who didn't get it. But we decided to take the easy way out, and that's to send students back into classrooms to be exposed.
What choice would you make to expand broadband for kids in rural areas who need it for virtual learning?
Well, I think one of the things that I thought was really interesting was that in some rural areas, they were sending school buses. They were wiring school buses with broadband and sending them in to be like hotspots in neighborhoods. Ideas like that, that's innovation, right? Right now, while we don't have the actual hard wiring everywhere, we could be doing more things like that. And so certainly I would vote to fund more of these hotspot scenarios where we could bring connectivity to students. I would certainly fund an increase in technology, in iPads and in laptops, whatever we needed to do to take instruction to kids, I would be for it.
Let me turn back over to the Charleston County School Board and obviously your race. Let me ask you this. What should every student in Charleston County School District need right now?
I think what every student in Charleston County School District needs right now, more than anything, is confidence in the system, right? Children are not immune, and they're not deaf. They hear, they see what's going on, and they hear their parents talking. I think that students are just as concerned about going back to school as parents are. And certainly, I'm sure some of them are excited. They're missing their friends and all these things we try to say. But I don't think we should shirk at the fact that they are experiencing the same reality that we are. And so more than anything, I'm going to use this word again, or this phrase again, students need social and emotional support. How are they really doing? And this is something that teachers don't have time to address. And so we need other officials. Is it more nurses? Is it more school, is it school psychologists? Is it more school counselors? We need people who can actually be checking in on students and making sure that this added layer of stress is not going to even more detrimentally impact their progress.
And I just got an email from you about the Zoom link.
Technology works when it wants to.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, and let me go back to also another issue. You talk about those nurses and all these other people. Who exactly should be at the table when it comes to trying to reopen these schools?
Oh my goodness! I think for a long time, and I think there's some changes. I know the Chamber of Commerce tries to be involved in education. I think we're leaving folks out who really need to be an issue. Parents are going to work. So business community leaders need to be at the table. The healthcare industry is the biggest piece of this. The healthcare industry needs to be at the table. The school board needs to be at the table. There's all these, but I think even bigger than that, teachers need to be at the table. They need to be listened to. Parents need to be at the table. They need to be listened to. I think these are not decisions you can make in a vacuum because everybody is so impacted. And we tend to isolate the conversation to those who we believe have all the answers, but nobody has all the answers. Education across this country is in sort of an abysmal state, if you ask me. And I think it's because we keep having the same conversations in the same silos. And the problem is we can't afford to do that anymore. We've got to unearth what really is the crux of the issues. And hard time doing that because we don't bring the conversation to the open.
And let me talk to you about something else. What exactly is the proposal to close the achievement gap if you were to be elected?
So, again, I would have to get in and see the specific issues in Charleston County presented from a policy standpoint. Because on the board, the role is the connection.
Oh, yes, ma'am. But you can go talk. Yeah.
Okay. So the board's role is to institute policies and make sure that policies are in place so that when there's an issue and they go to the policy and say, how can we address this? There's something prescriptive there. I think that what I would be doing is wanting to look at policy and make sure that it is thoughtful and inclusive of the diversity in the system. So we typically write, policies in a way that they're very open and that they pertain to everybody. But in writing policy like that, it actually doesn't pertain to everybody. Because if we think about the fact that the dominant culture and ideology is white and it is able-bodied and it is middle class, then that means that everyone who doesn't check those boxes, policies probably are going to impact them differently. And so again, what I want to do to help close the achievement gap is to make sure that we're taking a diversity lens, a diversity approach to examining policy, to addressing policy so that it doesn't only apply to people who check a certain box.
What policies have the Charleston County School District made so far that has been good or bad in the classroom?
Well, one of the things I think is hopeful in terms of policy right now is this conversation around implicit bias training and cultural competency. And I don't think it's good or bad yet because it hasn't been implemented. They're in the process. But I do think that there are a couple of pieces about their plan that stand out to me. One is that there's going to be a person who's over diversity, equity, and inclusiveness. And what I would say there is that the level that this person is reporting at is what matters, right? This person needs to be talking directly to the superintendent because the superintendent needs to always be understanding what is the pulse on diversity, equity, and inclusiveness issues in the Charleston County School District. The other piece of that is that I think if we're going to be doing implicit bias training, if we're going to be doing cultural competency, then we've got to make sure that teachers are getting all the support that they need to do that in a great way, to do that in a successful way. So that what that looks like to me is that DEI practitioners, which means people who have studied, learned, and proven themselves effective in helping with diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, should be in classrooms able to work with teachers to support them in the same way that we have instructional consultants in schools. We need to have DEI consultants. You cannot just tell people, you can't send people through a class once and never do it again. Because when you talk about implicit bias, these are things that are coloring your without you even knowing it. You're never going to fully outgrow that. This is going to be a lifelong journey. But what we often try to do is address things once and say we did it. It's sort of a checking the box, but it's not really doing the work with fidelity. And so I think it's wonderful that the district is thinking about this, especially with the current climate. I think, though, we need to make sure that it's done the most effectively for students.
And as much as I love Dr. Postwaite, let me ask you this question. Does she have a pulse on equity in the North area?
So I can't say whether she has a pulse. I will say I have not heard her specifically name the problem. And I think we need to get there. And I know, she has a difficult job. I'm not saying that she doesn't, and I'm not saying that she doesn't know education. But what I will say is, again, this is a lifelong journey for everyone. And so if you don't hear a person talking about it, then they're likely not entrenched in it, because this really does become a way of being. I mean, I myself, we all have privilege, right? We all have, maybe because we went to college, maybe because we have a certain job, and so we all sit in seats where we have blind spots and can't necessarily see how life and experiences are impacting other people. And so you've got to be deeply entrenched in this work, and the words have to be used and the problems have to be called in order for them to be effectively changed. And so again, she, along with everyone else involved in the situation, need to be laser focused in inundating themselves in unpacking, because they've spent their entire lives, and we've all spent our entire lives learning that the world is one way, and it's just not.
What specialized programs should be in existing North Charleston schools right now?
Honestly, and this is it, are you asking me my highest hope and dream, or you want me to give you my highest hope, or you want to give me want me to give you the practical?
Hey, you're running for office.
Yeah. So one, I think we need to be putting school nurses in schools, more nurses. I think we need to be addressing the issues that students come to school with, right? I think that the parent engagement folks, I'm not sure if we still have those in the district, but they desperately need to be there. People who know the community, people who actually might know parents in the community, to get them to feel comfortable coming into the schools and working with us. I think teachers need more. I think another program that needs to happen is that teachers need more time away from students to actually focus on rebuilding, resetting. If you think about, I'm thinking back to my time as a teacher. You go into the school with your lesson for the day. And if you're a new teacher, like I was at the time, you haven't quite grasped differentiated instruction, meaning having an assignment for the highest level student, the mid-level student, the lowest level student. So you have that one lesson. You're going to teach it that one way. And you teach it to first period, and they get it, and it's great. Then you teach it to second period, and they didn't really get it. So you have to reset. But you know what? 5 minutes from now, 3 minutes from now, these days, third period is coming. And so you didn't have a chance to reset, regroup, figure out where you needed to be. And teachers have planning periods, but a lot of times they're taken up with departmental meetings. A lot of times they're taken up because students need to come in and get, remediation and things like that. I think teachers need more time away from students in the school days to sort of regroup, reset, and be able to, to do their work more effectively. And so I think there's so many programs I would implement in the North area. And specifically when you have students not hitting the mark for the academic standards that are set for them, those teachers really need more time to work with and flesh out and figure out the path forward for them. And those students are going to need support for all of the myriad reasons why they're not hitting the mark.
And you talk obviously about the community. Let me ask you this, Ms. Waters. What exactly is your history with North Charleston?
So I've lived in North Charleston the entire time I've been here. I used to be on the board of the Teacher Supply Closet, which operates out of Garrett Academy. I have volunteered on political campaigns for my area representative. And so North Charleston is my home. It has been. My daughter is here, so I'm raising a family in North Charleston. I'm deeply committed to the community.
What leaders in North Charleston do you have a relationship with right now?
So Marvin Pendarvis is my local representative, and so I've always sort of advised him on education things since he first ran. I'm also connected. So I went through the Emerge SC program, and there are folks in North Charleston who are connected to that organization as well, who sort of helped me realize that I had the ability to impact the problem. Mike Brown is on city council in the North area, and so is Jerome Hayward, and so I know some of them. And so I've spent time around these conversations, and also I know business leaders here. I think of, actually Audrey, a woman named Audrey Wetzel. She runs a business in North Charleston, but then also was deeply involved in education through all the time that her students were in school, active in PTA. She actually had a school. And so I know quite a few community leaders. And there's other names I could call, but I also feel a little bit put on the spot because they might be like, oh, Courtney, don't mention me. Some people don't like to sort of be out in the public, and I want to be respectful of that as well. But yeah, so I've been around a lot of conversations around what we need to do to move the needle, around the fact that we need people who are willing to step up and actually, represent North Charleston and not forget who they're representing into the room.
What type of conversation are these people having about education in North Charleston?
Oh my goodness, so many. I mean, well, for one, all of them either have or have had children in the system. And so from a personal standpoint, they can name, okay, my student is doing well at this school, or okay, this thing happened to me or to my kid or to someone I know when they were in the school system. And I think that needs to be different. These are folks who pay attention to the news. These are folks who have been here through several superintendents, through many different administrations. And so they've been in and around education for a very long time. And so I think aside from the business conversation, or aside from sort of the political conversation, they're personal conversations about something that is operating in their community that is not operating at the highest level that it could.
Let me ask you this, Ms. Waters. What do you bring to the table for families in North Charleston that are in poverty?
Well, for one, I think what I bring to the table is the fact that I'm always going to remember them. I mean, frankly, I grew up in poverty. I grew up in I've lived in project housing before. I've been the student nobody thought would succeed. I've been the student who was told, every school that you're wanting to apply to for college is a dream school. I understand what it's like to not have my voice be heard, because what happens is if a person lives in poverty, we think that they don't deserve. We think that they are not educated enough to come to the table. We blame them for their situation rather than realizing that there is a system that is supporting them being where they are. And here's the thing, there's also nothing wrong, and I try not to even use the word in poverty. There's nothing wrong with not making as much money. But we, in sort of a capitalist society, people who make more money are better and people who don't are not, right? So what we've got to do is dispel that myth and remember that people are people. And whether a person makes a lot of money or not a lot of money, they care about their children.
What is the typical salary for a North Charleston parent?
I think it's somewhere. So the combined household median, I think, is around. It's in the $30,000 or $40,000 range.
And let me ask you this too. How many impoverished families have you been able to help in North Charleston over the years?
So I think I don't know that I specifically have helped folks, only in North Charleston. Again, I work for a state agency. I work for, a company that has operated programs in North Charleston. And so I would not say that I've specifically gone, aside from just volunteering at organizations that have sort of a standing reach. I have not tried to quantify how many people I've helped.
You talked earlier about teachers. Let me ask you this. How should incentive bonus pay to teachers who teach in the failing schools in North Charleston look like in your mind?
Well, I think all teachers deserve additional pay. And so whether they're in a failing school or a thriving school, teachers just need to be paid more. But I do think that there should be incentive for teachers to go to those schools. And I would have to think about what that looked like. Is that an additional $5,000? Is that an additional $10,000? I think what makes the difference in that, you can't just put a price tag. You actually have to figure out what dollar amount will make people change their minds. Right. There's a go, no go number for everybody. And you've got to figure out what that is. How much is it worth for a teacher to go into that school? But here's the other thing. We don't want teachers in our failing schools supporting students who have been underserved just for money. We want teachers in those schools who actually want to be in the building, because the biggest hindrance to a student doing well is whether the teacher in the classroom believes they can actually thrive. And so it's not just a question of money. It's a question of mindset.
What system should be enacted to raise teachers' pay, and how should the Charleston County School District reduce the teacher turnover?
So, one, I think increasing teacher pay it's more of a municipality issue, because we would frankly have to raise taxes in order to give teachers more money, or figure out where else the money could come from. And so I don't think the school district has as much power over that as municipality or state governments, or municipal or state governments. But in terms of teacher retention, right, I think greater supports in that first and second year, really first through fifth year. A lot of teachers leave the profession after that first year, that second year, because they just couldn't make it, because what they learned in their teacher preparation program didn't really prepare them for all of the issues that are going to be present in the school. So I think, one, better supports in terms of coaching and access during those first few years would work. But then also all of these things I had mentioned before about the nursing staff, the guidance counselors, principals being freed up to actually deal with instructional excellence and not just behavior problems. All those things will help teachers be more successful, because once all of the other pieces of the puzzle are dealt with, then the teacher is suddenly freer anyway, and not having to, quarterback so different things in the classroom.
How has administrative costs effectively killed teachers' pay in the state of South Carolina?
So that's a great question, to which I don't know the answer on a micro level, because I'm not looking at their budgets. I can't say specifically the administrative costs are the reason why teachers are not paid more. I think the reason that teachers are not paid more has to do with the mindset, but that's not just in South Carolina. That's on a national level. We don't value what teachers do, and so we don't pay them more to do it. Once we put the value there and really understand what teachers are doing and going through every day, then we'll be more likely to see an increase in their pay, not be, sort of stunted every time it's attempted.
Should Charleston County schools start hiring experienced teachers from other states?
I'm sure they already do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think here, again, what you're going to have as an issue, and COVID-19 is impacting this as well, is that people are going to be, so typically when the economy falls, more people are interested in teaching, right? But then you have COVID-19 on top of it, telling teachers they have to go into classrooms and making them feel unsafe. And so whether we're thinking about recruiting people from outside the district or outside of the state, or recruiting people right from our backyard, we've got to think, what are the conditions we're putting in place, and is it going to make teaching more or less desirable? Are we even going to have a pool to recruit from? But no, I don't think there's anything with recruiting from out of state, but I think we need to be thinking about who's in our backyard that we could be training up, because identity is a huge part of teaching, and the more you can relate to students, the more their cultural identity you can relate to or share with them, the more successful you're going to be.
What's that cultural identity for the North area?
Well, I think it's different. the North Charleston area is not monolithic, right? We're not all the same. You got students who need various things. I think what I would be looking for in terms of responding to the cultural identity in the North area is looking at the demographic makeup, whether it's income, whether it's race, whether it's gender, what have you, and trying to get the teaching staff to mirror that. Do we have teachers who share backgrounds and cultural identities with our students? I think that's going to help.
And let me go back to the classroom. What type of curriculum would you advocate for if you were on the school board today?
So I think one, curriculum should be able to be responsive to the environment that you're in. I would love to advocate for getting to a place where the curriculum is not exactly the same across the board. You can give standards and say, this is where students need to be, this is what they need to learn, and let the instructional leaders, the principals in those buildings determine what you need to do. And I'm not saying just give them all free reign, in a sense that nobody's accountable for what comes out of this. But let principals come to the table and say, this is the climate in my school, this is what's going to work here. And make sure that principal is consulting with the teachers and the instructional leaders in their schools. And so the type of curriculum that I would advocate for is one that is reactive and able to suit the particular needs of that building.
How transparent is the Charleston County School District?
I've been to some board meetings, but I wouldn't say that they're not transparent, but I would say that I think maybe when the opportunity presents itself, we're maybe not having the conversations that matter most to people. I was at a particular school board meeting where it was actually shut down because there were some parents advocating for a school not to be closed down. This was actually it was historically all Black boys charter school.
Right.
I was at that school board meeting, and they were protesting, and because the meeting wasn't going the way the board thought, most of the members left. They got up and left. And when I think about transparency and I think about that situation, I think you've got members of your community who have gotten to a point of feeling like they need to come in and completely stop the conversation to be heard. That's problematic. So we need to think about why that is. And so whether it's lack of transparency around why that school was actually closed, whether there's lack of transparency around what were the metrics, what were the standards that were determining whether that school was being viewed as successful in the eyes of Charleston County, perhaps there wasn't enough transparency and collaboration with the community and with that school around what that looked like. And I can't say I know all the nitty-gritties of the situation. I was sitting there and I was sort of stunned, though, that everyone had left. Because I'm like, they're actually wanting to be heard right now. And I get that it's disruptive and ideal, but that's what happens when people aren't listened to.
What in your mind would make a school board effective, particularly in Charleston County?
Yeah, so school boards are only effective when they're able to operate as a unit. What we have unfortunately seen is that there's a lot of sort of bickering, there's a lot of disagreement, there's a lack of ability to build consensus. So what would make a school board successful is to have members on it who are respectful of each other and understanding that if we don't all reach a consensus, we actually can't do anything because no individual on the school board has individual power.
Let me ask you this about consensus. How can they have consensus when you have at least 6 Charleston Coalition for Kid Back members on that board?
Well, I don't know that who backs a particular school board candidate has anything to do with what the consensus can be. If I think about my experience as a candidate, right, I'm running my own race. I have to raise my own money. I have to go out and talk to voters on my own. I'm sort of, doing the work of getting my ideas out there and seeing who I can connect to. If an organization comes along and says, we believe in you and we want to support you, I don't really think those two things are connected, and I don't think we should necessarily see it that way. And I'm not sure. I know that there are people who the coalition has backed on the board currently, but I think also this is a different year with completely different candidates, and I think that we need to hear the candidates and not be upset that, oh, this organization supports that candidate. Because if you like what I have to say, then you support me. But I'm running my race, And I appreciate any organization or any person that says, we believe in you. Can we help you buy some yard signs? Frankly, school board campaigns cost money just like others do. And especially with COVID-19, with us not being able to get out on foot as much, we've got to be able to put out those yard signs. We've got to be able to put some ads, out and do some different creative things. And so again, I think whether they're backed by a coalition, whether they're backed by the Chamber of Commerce, whether they're backed by whomever, I'm going to work with whoever comes to the table and has a heart for children and is willing to work with me in building consensus and making positive decisions.
And currently, the Charleston Coalition for Kids have a couple of board members on there right now: Kathleen Darby, Sydney Bondcoats, Joyce Green, and of course Eric Mack. But let me ask you this, Courtney: how will your vote be with 6 Charleston Coalition for Kids back members on that board?
You said, how will my vote be? Well, it's going to speak. All the issues that I've talked about today is what I'm going to vote, for. Who else is on the board doesn't make a difference in how I am going to conduct myself and how I'm going to behave. I'm representing people who were like me, people who were written off, people who were counted out. And I just happen to be one of the lucky folks who's lucky enough to be sitting here talking to you today and trying to work to make the change, because so many people who have experiences with the system that I've had just get beaten down so bad to the point that they don't even want to deal with it. And so I'm here for people like me. I'm not here for anybody else. I'm here for the folks in North who have some adjacent to my thought process, who agree with the way that I want to see things, and who believe in my ability to make a difference.
And you talk about North Charleston. What educational models do you hope the Charleston County School District use in the future for those underperforming schools?
Yeah, so, there's not one particular model. Again, I think it's going to be an approach to what is the climate of this particular building. Schools are neighborhood schools, right? And so you've got Charleston, you've got North Charleston, you've got, Liberty Hill, you've got Ackaby, you've got all of these different communities, and those communities look different because the children have different experiences based on literally their zip code. And as unfair and ridiculous as that is, in America, your access to opportunities about where you live. And in addition to that, all of the supports that you're going to need are going to be determined by the culture in that particular area. And I think that the principals need to be able to make those decisions.
Let me ask you this. How should the Charleston County School District replicate results of the Meeting Street schools to fix some of the district's issues inside the underperforming schools?
Well, I'm not really sure. So here's the thing. If a school works in one area, that's great. Maybe we can take some things that work there and do some similar things. But again, it's not a one size fits all. I think that, I've been inside street schools. And one of the things that I think is cool, freedom to address curriculum issues. They get to set and choose their own curriculum. That's one of the things I'd like to see replicated in other schools, because again, principals need to have that kind of control in figuring out what will work for their specific populations. Teachers need to have that control. I also think that the 2-teacher in a classroom model is really excellent. It works very well when it's done correctly. When you have 2 teachers who work well together, it makes tremendous results for students. And so I don't know everything about the Meeting Street model, but those 2 things that I've seen in particular, I think are good things that, that are certainly worth looking into. But I think there are many different out there. There's so many different ways that sort of failing schools have been helped. And I think we should look into all of those different things and think about what can happen in Charleston. I think we should look across the state. And I think we should also look inside of some of our more successful schools right around here. What are they doing? What are they doing that is not being given to the North Charleston or not being done in the North Charleston area that we can take and implement?
What are the top free schools in North Charleston, and what are the top underperforming schools?
So I know that the School of the Arts, the Academic Magnet, and I'm not sure of what the third top performing school might be. But when I think of underperforming schools, I don't know on a scale, but I know schools like Shakora, schools like Mary Ford, which is actually changing in look. But I know the schools in goodness, if you hadn't asked me this question, I would have called the school. But it's a mostly Hispanic population school in North Charleston. And we haven't even discussed that as an issue, right? Students who don't speak English as a first language are grossly underserved. And so what are we doing about getting more Hispanic or Spanish speaking folks in the district who can relate to and identify with and communicate to those students? So, and again, I don't know the ranking in terms of this one is number 40, this one is number 1. But I know there are certain schools whose names you sort of always hear are not doing as well. And I think we need to be doing better by figuring out better toward figuring out exactly what it's going to take to move the needle. And the answer is not just money. It is a whole wraparound support approach.
What data should the Charleston County School District use to make a decision on securing the future of its most at-risk students?
So I think one, special data support needs to be put in place. A lot of times we look to tests, just that one test or the 2 times that we take a test. But I think that we've got to think about formative testing. So testing that happens throughout the school year. Testing that happens, okay, well, how did they do? And I'm not saying national tests. I'm talking about teachers assigning some sort of activity that is graded. Because it doesn't have to look like a pen and paper sitting down and writing a test. Maybe it's a project the student creates. Maybe it's an assignment that they all do in class. It could look all types of ways, but what you've got to do is start capturing student performance level in one spot, and then within another 30 days or 4 weeks or 5 weeks or however, whatever you deem appropriate, you've got to capture it again and be able and see if you can see an upward trajectory. And the more often that you're checking in, not testing necessarily, but the more often that you're checking in and using tools to figure out where students are performing, the better you're able to adjust and reassess your lesson. But again, that also comes with giving teachers the time and space to be able to review those assessments and adjust and start on a new course.
How many gaps are there in the SC Ready test scores?
So I have not in a long time looked intensely at, I know 8th grade reading scores, 3rd grade reading scores, and math scores have been historically very low for students of color, including African American students and Hispanic students, Spanish speaking students. But what I also know is that actually the system does not work for most students because, for instance, all students might be performing at 74%. Well, that still means 25% of students, no matter what they look like, where they come from, are not doing well. Maybe 80%, but there's a whole 20%. 20% is a lot. We get excited when we say, 80% of my students are passing. That's 20 students out of 100 that are not doing well, and that's unacceptable. It's only acceptable if you believe that all kids can't learn. And so again, I don't know the exact statistics, but I do know that reading and math scores are historically low for all students, and particularly students of color.
And have you been able to look at the test scores in the North area, particularly at those free and underperforming schools?
So I haven't. I'm not actually sure. So I would probably have to go and look school by school. The last time I looked at something like this was last year sometime, and the data was very old. It was actually from about 2 years ago. Okay. And I was not able to look. I could look at individual schools, but there's no North area separation of data or Mount Pleasant separation of data when you go and look at the State Department's test results.
And let me ask you this: what in your mind defines an equal education?
I'm sorry, what?
What in your mind defines an equal education?
So one, I don't use the word equal, I use equitable. In my mind, what defines that is that you're giving all students the supports that they need to be the best that they can be, and that you're not putting a cap on the best that they can be. Because let's be very clear and very real about the fact that we as adults will look at particular students and say, they're never going to get that. They weren't prepared for that. They can't. And so one, the mindset contributes to equity. You've got to first believe that all students can actually grasp this material and do better. And then two, you've got to put everything in place. You've got to do everything in your power to mitigate, whether that's better nutrition, whether that is, extended time on reading and math, whether that's teaching material to them in a different way, because a lot of times we use direct instruction. We stand here and talk and we expect students to receive and soak it up, but that's actually not the best way that students learn, and all students don't learn in the same way. And so I think differentiated instruction, supports outside of just the normal school day, and then the mindset with which we approach the work are first.
Well, let me ask you this. Does an equal education means equal outcomes?
No, not at all. Because I think we've also got to think about what outcome we're trying to achieve. right? So certainly everybody needs to pass the test, right? But I remember when I was in high school, my school district in Tennessee had a program called Every Child, Every Day College Bound. Well, that is simply ridiculous because not every student wants to go to college. Not every student needs to go to college. And so the outcome looks different. You know, if a student is artistic, what are the outlets? What are the ways that we're enabling them to express that creativity and drive toward an outcome that artists go to, you know? I think that outcomes don't look the same. Outcomes only look the same when the inputs look the same, but the inputs don't look the same. And so we need to be better about determining what the outcomes need to be for our students.
And let me ask you this too, because this is another question that I have. And I saw this on your website. It says this quote, "I am running for every child, parent, teacher, and community member who has felt the brunt of structural inequity." What does that look like in the North area?
Yeah, so what structural inequity looks like in the North area is the curriculum doesn't reflect students' history, doesn't reflect the look of students. You know, you think about history is the most notorious class, right, for this, where you learn about Black history in a paragraph in a history book. That is structural inequity. You are literally teaching a child that they only existed in the past, and their only role in this country was subservice, was in slavery. So there's that piece. There's the structural inequity of not building students' reflections of themselves into the curriculum. There is the structural inequity of our schools lacking diversity. There's the structural inequity around putting teachers in classrooms without helping them realize that they have got to first unpack how they're coming to the work, so that they can identify with the students, meaning that implicit bias training that they're doing now, right? Structural inequity takes on so many different forms. You've got the idea, you know, to me, it is structurally inequitable to not include parents, you know, when critical decisions are being made. People are sending their best to schools, and a lot of times they're coming back to us worse than they left off. So where are we involving parents in the conversation and saying, what is your highest and best hope for your child? And how can we help create a path that gets you there? And so it takes on many different forms. Sometimes it takes on the form of funding, but again, I don't know that to be explicitly true in Charleston. I would have to get in and look at budgets. But yeah, personnel issues, curriculum issues, social support issues. The structural inequity is just there because that's how this country has been built. And we've just got to be okay with recognizing that so that we can all move forward together.
By Charleston County School District providing busing for charter schools, would that help with diversity?
Oh, sure. Yeah. That was a big surprise to me when I learned that charter schools are not required to have busing systems, because that means literally only students whose parents can get them to that school every morning can go. And at the onset, inequitable, right? All students need access. And so if access is going to be that, if it's going to be access, then we've got to provide a way for every child to go and get that opportunity.
And let me ask you one last question. You said this quote on your Facebook page: "I've officially filed to run for election to the Charleston County School District's Consolidated Board of Trustees for the North area. This feels like a very necessary step towards ensuring we hold the school system accountable for serving all students regardless of zip code. Question: how should people hold you accountable for serving all students if you're elected?"
Oh, thank you for asking me that. Things like this, you ask tough questions. I think everybody should do the same. I think people should talk to elected officials. I think we have too many instances where the government is not serving the people that it represents. And so I'm eager to get out and meet each and everybody who is interested in school board issues, each and everybody who has a child and would like me to hear, their experience, knowing and understanding that I can't impact everything, because at the board level, it's about me. But I understand the issues, I know what I need to take into these meetings with me, because listen, I will not forget who I'm serving, because this is not, for me, this is not Courtney running for Courtney. This is literally my desire to see things just be different for children. I'm ready to stop talking about it and just start doing the work.
And let me ask you one last question. You probably know this, but the Charleston County legislative delegation passed legislation for board compensation up to like $14,000. But I know the Charleston County School Board has to take a vote on that. If you were on the board today, what vote would you take?
Well, I mean, I would vote for that, and it's not. And let me explain why.
Okay.
One, Charleston County School Board is one of the only that gets paid so low. If you go to Lexington, if you go to, all types of different places, they get paid $14,000 a year, $9,000 a year, what have you. I think what you end up getting when you pay people, because I think right now it's like $25 a meeting, but I'm running still, right? So it's not about the money for me. I have a job. I'm not trying to get paid from this. But I think what you get is for people who do work and are going to be taking time away from their jobs and asking their bosses, hey, maybe they have an hourly job and they're asking for time away, they're going to make less money. This actually opens up the opportunity for more people who don't already have a set salary and, what have you, to take advantage of this opportunity. The other thing is, most people don't want to do something they're not going to be paid for when they're parents and they have a home to care for and they have to do, so I think paying people for the work that they're doing, just like anywhere else in the world, when you go on a job, you take that job based on what they're paying you. And if you stop feeling like, you're getting compensated for what you're doing, you're going to depart from that. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with school board members making money. I think it's unfortunate that we attach such a negative stigma to school board members making, a couple $100s to do the work. But again, there is no pay increase right now. It's about $25 a meeting, but here I am running. And so whether that passes or not, I'm here.
You're here. And I wanted to ask you this too. Magnet, charter, obviously partial magnet, and statewide charter schools. Why are there so many choices?
Well, I think, choices reflect what the system wants, right? Like if people are calling for different opportunities, then perhaps that's why they exist. But what I will also say, because I'm very familiar with conversations around charter, magnet, and all these types of things, what we've realized is there's so much bureaucracy and it's so difficult, which is also why I'm interested in the school board, right? The policies that govern. Why is there so much red tape to changing things? So I think you have people who genuinely have good ideas about how to change education. And again, this is a complex problem, which nobody has the answer to there, because there's not a singular answer because it's so specific to different people. But when you come to the table and you say, I have this idea to change it, but it's, you can't do this and you can't do that because of the system that's in place, they get to a point where they say, well, maybe I'll just open up my own. And maybe I'll just figure out, maybe I'll implement mine and not have to deal with that red tape and go. And so for me, I'm not pro-charter or anti-charter. I'm not pro-magnet or anti-magnet. I'm pro-great schools. So if it works well as a public school, keep going. If it works well as a charter, keep going. But the question is it serving students?
You talk about red tape. How would you, if on the school board, try to help get politics out of public education?
Oh, goodness, no. The thing about it is that is a task. I'm not even sure. I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen, because unfortunately, where you have people being employed, where you have people with a little bit of power, politics is always attached to it. I think they tried to take politics out of it by making the board nonpartisan. But for me personally, into the room, children need to be at the center of the conversation. And I think too many times, entire brought up, and shockingly, you don't hear children. You don't hear children enough. But if we think back to, with every question that comes up, with every policy that's sitting on the table, how is this going to affect a child that is walking down the hall of Deer Park Elementary School, or Morningside Middle, or Meeting Street, or Mary Ford Elementary? How is this going to impact those students? I think that's how you start to depoliticize it, when you remember why you came, and it's for the children.
Will the single member districts depoliticize that?
No. So I know this was a hot button issue, and in a perfect world, yes, it would. But this is not a perfect world. When you have single member districts and you have, politicians representing a specific district, that sounds great. But what you have to think about is, what are the lines that compose that district? So there's an idea. There's two ideas on the table. There was the idea to separate it with the county council lines. And then there's the idea to take this year's census results and just draw them ourselves. Well, there are two things that come to mind. One, the county council is less diverse than the school board. That's one. Two, when you think about even using the census data to draw the lines, a lot of times people of color don't take the census because they don't trust the system. They don't, why do you need this information? I don't want to give you that information. And it's because of historic inequity at the hands of the system that they don't trust it, right? And so what you might very well find is much less diverse lines drawn, even in the end. And so if you think about a Black child, if you think about a Hispanic child, if you think about a child who from a family that doesn't make as much money as the people that filled out the census data is going to say this area is filled with middle class, $60,000 a year married couples. When in fact there are several single mothers. When in fact there are several folks who make $30,000 a year making up that. Decisions are going to be made off the 60,000 in the married couple status. And so single member districts are only as helpful as we draw the lines to include the diversity that's within that member's district. So in a perfect world, yes, you got one person you can go to with your problems. But what if that one person representing that district, or what if that district makeup is not adequately representative of the people who are really living there? Then you don't really get the same results.
What results do you need now as far as census and obviously with equality?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, so you need to know who lives where. So for instance, if there is a huge population of folks who make less money, and then there's a small population of folks who make more money, but the way you filled out the census only reflects the people who make more money, well, programs that are attached to income earning will not be available in those districts. For instance, when you think about the school makeup, you got to know who's in your district to know how to serve students. And so I'm thinking heavily about the real impact of the bill that was introduced. And I don't think it's going to actually make a big difference because we've got to be thoughtful about the tools that are informing how we draw those lines.
What tools do you want to use?
Well, I mean, we have to use the census, but what I would like to see happen is that we educate people more on exactly what the census is, that we educate voters more on what it means to be involved in the political process, what it means to be involved in state processes. But guess what? You got a long way to go to do that because people who don't trust the system don't trust the system for a reason. And so I think we've got to recognize how we have failed so many people, whether it's in school or otherwise. We've got to be willing to go in and hear from them and educate them. And so this is at all levels, right? These are all, now I'm talking about everybody who's running this year, needs to be really listening to who's in their district and trying to get an understanding of who's in their district and what needs to change in order to make the system more equitable, whether it's the education system, whether it's the prison system, whether it's the banking system, the mortgage, like all of these institutions that impact people just need to be more aware that there's difference among us.
What are you listening to? What is the constituents telling you about the school district?
Well, I mean, I hear a lot of people upset. It's funny, when I was canvassing to collect signatures, I heard, people just upset that, the school board doesn't get along. People upset that, about the schools that are changing, like Houston in the West Ashley Magnet School and different things like that. And I'm hearing, well, they don't listen to us. I went to them with this problem and nobody said anything. It's shocking how much I hear people just say they don't listen to us, because underlying that is this idea of respect. And if you're going to be elected to serve people, you have to first respect people and value their opinions.
Courtney Waters, thank you so much for your time. And again, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you, Quintin.
You're very welcome.